Each year around this time, I open up my Time Hop app and I'm reminded of a night. 3 years ago, photos of softball-size black and blue bruises all over the right side of my body come up. I'm honestly somewhat thankful for that because it could have been much worse. I'll just never know. 3 years ago, after a blackout Wednesday night with friends, I found myself locked out of my partner at the Times apartment at around 3 a.m. She was out with co-workers doing the same after her serving shift ended. We live in a big city, so I taken the train from where the night ended with my friends straight to her place and decided I'd just wait for her rather than head back home, as the commute would be another half hour or so and my phone was dying. I was honestly just ready to sleep. In hindsight, I obviously just should have headed to my own apartment that night after multiple texts and phone calls from me to her to come home. My partner, being thoroughly annoyed with me, was not in any rush to end their night. Drunk and upset, I sat inside the entrance gate to her apartment community and salt. It was raining and cold, and I was exhausted putting myself in the situation. All alone was my parents' worst nightmare, but at this point my phone was dead. I didn't have enough cab money, and there was no way in hell I was walking 15 minutes back to the train to head to my own apartment. But a few minutes later, a man in a ski mask, sunglasses, and an oversized parka walks up to me. I remember him so vividly, asking, "Are you okay?" I responded that I was fine, and the police stay away from me. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought for a split second he was genuinely concerned. I mean, here I was, a college-aged girl sitting outside in the rain at 3 a.m. completely alone. But at 3 a.m. you don't just approach a girl dressed like that and mean no harm. He then brandished an X-Acto knife and then asked, "You sure you're okay?" He picked me up with one hand while repeatedly striking at the back of my hood with the knife. All I could do was scream. I know I asked him why he was doing this, but I couldn't even bring myself to pull out the mace in my coat pocket. I was so stunned. Talk about fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know if it was a car that drove by or my screaming that caused him to stop, but after the longest 30 seconds or so of my life, he threw me to the ground and ran, leaving me with this awful aforementioned bruises. I'll be forever grateful for the thick hood on my coat that came away with some knife cuts. Had my hood not been up, he would have absolutely sliced the back of my neck and head. My partner pulled up in a cab a few minutes later. At least I think it was a few minutes later. It was really a blur. I definitely went into a state of shock. We called 911 from her charged phone, stayed awake for the police to come and take a report, but we didn't hear much else afterward. There's a decent amount of crime in my city, so I wasn't really expecting much to come of it. What scares me the most is that, number one, I still don't know what the man wanted. Number two, he knows what I look like, and I have absolutely no idea what he looks like. Number three, I'm pretty certain I was followed all the way from the transit station to the apartment complex, which was a fairly long walk. Those three reasons still give me chills. This is more backpacking than a walk, but if this terrifies me to this day. Story 2. Our planned camping spot for the night was full. We'd backpacked all day to get to that location, and there wasn't anywhere close to set up our tents. We called our guy on the outside to come pick us up as it was getting late. We didn't have anywhere to set up camp, and a storm was approaching. We hiked to the nearest exit point on the trail, met our pickup guy, and he drove us a few miles to the nearest campsite we were familiar with that we could basically drive up to. Long logging path, pretty deep in the mountains that we'd hiked to in previous years, so we were kind of familiar with the area. Anyways, we hop out of the van, and it's pitch black out, no moon. It's April in the mountains, and still pretty chilly. We're cold, hungry, and exhausted. That's when we notice this fox staring at us from behind a tree. I know this sounds like a no-sleep story, but it's 100 true, and probably the most scared I've ever been. We noticed this guy, no headlamp, no equipment, no backpack, just standing there. One of our group, a former Marine, yells at him to come out and explain what his deal is. This guy walks a few feet out from behind the tree, and we all shine our lights at it, and I not this guy's white t-shirt is covered in what looks like blood smears. He's pretty rough looking, long hair, long beard, crazy eyes, and he was wearing a bloody t-shirt and shorts in 35-degree weather at night. We're all pretty freaked out, and this is a pretty experienced group of hikers who have seen some. We ask the guy what his deal is, and he says we can't camp here. We tell him that's exactly what we plan to do, and he says, "I don't think that's a good idea for any of you." We kind of turn and discuss as a group. When we look back, he's heading back behind the tree. As a group, we basically decided none of Us were getting any sleep that night if we stayed here, so we packed up the van and left. As we were pulling out, this guy pulled out one of those red filtered flashlights and ran after our van. I'm not kidding, he followed us for at least a quarter mile on foot. He was fast. As we passed a park ranger on the road and flagged him down to tell him how weird that guy was acting, and he said he'd go investigate, I didn't hear anything about it again. 4 or 5 years. For the longest time I thought he was probably some pot farmer who had a nearby plot, or a moonshiner who was just living in the woods and didn't want us. Nearest still, people hunt all the time out there, which would maybe explain the blood of it, but I was recently at an event with some of the guys again for the first time in years, and that creepy guy from the woods got brought up. One of them, who still lives nearby, broke out his phone and said, I forgot to tell you guys I saw him again. He pulls up a news article and there he was. It so obviously the same guy. He'd been arrested for murdering some poor girl on the trail. The timelines didn't match up, so I fully believe we saw this guy shortly after he murdered someone else. He hasn't been charged with anything else as far as I'm aware. I'm not backpacking without a gun anymore. This happened to me one night at 2 a.m. I work out of an art studio in downtown. Story 3. Fargo, North Dakota. It's between the two shadiest bars in town, so I see a lot of odd people. Usually my interactions with them are harmless or sad, but from time to time someone comes along that really freaks me out. One night I was pulling a late one and ended up leaving at around 2 a.m. When I left my shop, I saw that a train was coming through, so I knew I would have to wait for a while. On my side of the street, I saw a group of men standing around and talking. When I stopped, they all looked at me and my gut dropped hard. I really cannot stress how this gut feeling seemed so instinctual. I see people by these bars all the time, but this was a different sensation. They began to walk to me. I turned to go back to my shop, and they increased their pace. The image that's burned into my brain is of the guy that was at the front. He had a cigarette sticking out of his mouth and was clearly pretending to look the other way as he came near. I dashed into my shop, slammed the door closed, and locked it. The man tried to open it and began pounding on the other side. Let me in, man, one of them said. I grabbed a hatchet from the tools and talked through the locked door. One thing I learned from working downtown around these people is that you need to keep a cool demeanor. If you get aggressive or have fear in your voice, they tend to stick around. If my responses seem odd, that is why. Let me be clear, I was terrified. What's up, man? I asked. We got some ladies out here. Let us in, we just want to have a good time. The guy said, not interested, leave me alone. I responded, we got more ladies coming, come on. He tried to open the door again. I called 911 and I could hear him talking to his friends out front. They weren't laughing, just talking. That chilled me. Usually the creeps downtown are just drunk and rude. They laugh and blunder around. These guys did not sound drunk. Police showed up and were kind enough to drive me home. The group was nowhere to be seen. The thing that freaks me out is that I'm an average-sized guy in his mid-20s. The clothes I had on were my shop clothes and did not scream carrying cash. Usually I'm the one walking girls to their cars. In diffusing situations, I don't know what they wanted. If it wasn't closer to my shop, I don't know what would have happened. Story 4. So this was a few years back, and I was walking home from a friend's house after hanging at hers after school. It was around 9:30 p.m. in summer, so the sun had for the most part set. It was relatively dark, but still bright enough where I could make out the things around me. I was stoned and walking very slowly down the road to my house, which was only about a 20-minute walk from my friend's. The majority of my walk was spent on a straight, quiet suburban street that was very familiar to me, as I'd done this walk plenty of times before. After maybe 5 minutes of walking, I noticed the first and only car to drive past, but it was an old beat-up white Honda, which I didn't take much notice to until another few minutes passed, and it drove past again still, and I wasn't concerned and continued about my walk, admiring the cracks in the pavement or doing whatever else a stoned 14-year-old does on a walk. Another minute passes, and this car drives past again, this time more slowly, and I feel my stomach drop. I couldn't make out who was inside, but I knew something was off. I've always been very timid, so I tried to convince myself it's just paranoia, and that I was just being dramatic, until it drives past again about 2 minutes later and then parked about 10 feet in front of me. As I approached the car, I kept my head down, but I hear her, hey there, and sure enough I look up and there was A rough-looking man who you could tell just from appearance alone that he smelt like stale cigarettes and body odor, sitting in the driver's seat smiling at me. The lack of teeth and dirty shirt this man had on gave me a horrible vibe, so I just gave a little smile back and continued walking. I look up and notice he's driving alongside me. He asked if I had directions to the closest gas station. I stopped and pointed in the general direction and told him where to go and that it was less than a 5-minute drive away. Out of nowhere, he just started to laugh. I kind of just stared in confusion and fear as he squinted his eyes at me like he was trying to get a better look at my face. Then he said, "I'll take a guess, but I think I can tell from those eyes you've been smoking pot, little mess." I kind of just laughed and tried to walk away when he said, "Come back." So I stopped in my tracks. Why I didn't just keep walking is beyond me, but I turned around and he pulls out a rather large bag of weed and asks if I want some. I tell him I'm okay and I have no money, and he said something along the lines of "I don't need your money, take it." If I reassure him I'm fine and don't need it and try to continue walking, but nonetheless he continued driving alongside me. He then asked if I need a ride home and tells me it's too dark to be walking alone, which really frightened me. He continued trying to coerce me into his car and I became more and more unsettled. I began to look for the closest house with the lights on, and after finding one I tell him this is my house, good night, and I walk up some stranger's driveway and straight into their home. It was a middle-aged couple sitting in the living room and they looked extremely shocked and equally angry, and I just started to sob out of shock and relief and apologized profusely. I explained to them what just happened. The very kind lady assured me I did the right thing and gave me a ride home. Looking back, I probably should have knocked, but I was scared under the influence and still a child, and the homeowners were very understanding. It's still one of the scariest things that has happened to me, but I'm so glad that I trusted my gut and got away from the man whose intentions seemed anything but pure, and I still consider myself lucky that I got away. Story 5. A bit of context here. I was around 10 to 11 years old when this happened, old enough to stay home alone, but not old enough to recognize some red flags. I attended camp over the summer. The typical 8 to 3 routine. My house sits close to the end of my street, which forms a U, but for some reason the bus driver would never drop me off at my house. I would always get dropped off at the end of my street, where I would toddle myself along back home. Both my parents worked late hours, sometimes not getting home until 8 p.m., and it would be very expensive to hire a babysitter for 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So starting 6th grade, when the bus dropped me off at home, I would be by myself. I do the usual middle school routine: play games online and watch TV. Occasionally my neighbor's cat would come into my backyard and I would feed and pet her as a way to get outside. The only computer in the house was in my dad's workroom, which has a window overlooking the deck and a window overlooking the side of the house. We have large bay windows in the living room, dining room, and kitchen of my house. And since we sit on a hill, you can pretty much see the entire backyard from a nice vantage point. So most days when I got home, I toss off my backpack and go right to that room. And he could see me walk from my front door and pop up by the computer from outside. Unfortunately, this would lead to something that I had forgotten about up until now. When I got off the bus, what I did, as expected, go into my dad's workroom and play computer games. About 30 minutes into this, I can hear a faint meowing coming from the outside window. I pause the game and look outside, thinking maybe the neighbor's cat had wandered over. Nothing. I just sat back down and resumed playing, only to hear the meowing again. It was quiet but noticeable, and so I checked the other window. Nothing again. This routine happened for a good 10 minutes, and eventually I got frustrated and went to the living room to watch TV. Not even 2 minutes later, meowing from the window I was sitting right beside. Now I was confused and a little creeped out, so I shut the blinds and kept trying to watch TV. The meows continued, but only when they came from the window right behind me did I jump and leave the living room. Officially skeethed, I went into my bedroom, where the blinds were down but still cracked for some sunlight. My best to read a book, only to hear a meow coming from outside my bedroom window. This was enough to make me call my dad, concerned that maybe the cat was hurt, but I couldn't see it to be sure. He said he would have the neighbor come check it out and call me back later. 10 minutes go by and I get a call from my dad saying he was coming home from work. Nothing urgent in his voice, just that his job had gotten canceled and he would come home early. I felt nothing of it, and when he got Home did I realize the cat noises had stopped. Fast forward to the present, and I asked my dad about the strange incident, thinking it was funny the cat had followed me around. What he told me next made my blood run cold. After I called him, my neighbor did indeed come to check on the house. What he found were large footprints leading in circles all around the house, clustered close to the walls, so that even if I looked outside, I wouldn't see anything. Someone had been stalking me through my house, seeing where I was through the windows, making cat noises to try and get me to come outside. They must have known I was home alone, since it was easy to see me walk around by myself down the street and let myself in. My neighbor immediately called my dad and searched the property, but he found no one. The police weren't cold, since there was nothing but footprints that led off into the woods and got lost, and I never saw anyone. My dad stayed home with me for the rest of the week. It sickens me to know that there are people who would use these tactics to try and lure kids out of their homes, and from there do whatever they wanted with them. Story 6. First, we'll need context. My old house was pretty pumped up on security. We had finger ID passcodes on doors, cameras everywhere, an automatic security system that could call the police or play fake the cops had been called, blah blah blah. This story happened a few years back. My dad noticed a weird-looking man, pretty covered up, lurking on the streets just outside of our house. We thought nothing of it, since sometimes you get the occasional drunk or high person wandering around, but this man started to inch closer to our house, first being on the opposite side of our street, and before we knew it, being basically on our property. We just sort of watched him to see what he would do. I'm pretty sure we just got bored and walked away and just forgot. Then we started to hear a strange noise coming from downstairs. We decided to switch on the camera, and sure enough, this guy is banging on our door trying to get in. Then he looks through a window. He gives up and then starts to go around to the side. He starts to head up the stairs, and my dad decided to go to the side of the house where he was with a kitchen knife and scream at him. This guy runs and we don't see him again, and that'd be the end, right? Wrong. This guy comes back again. I guess he saw that the car was gone from the driveway. The guy looks around again. We did not want to confront this guy, so I had the idea of playing the fake cop alert that could be heard outside. So we played it, and as soon as this guy heard it, he ran. We never saw him again, and never want to. What makes this story creepier is that on the news later it showed a guy who lurked around houses and killed people. That man had been arrested. It was the same man who was at our house. Story 7. There's an abandoned and boarded up World War II for it in the southern part of Belgium that we often sneak into with the scouts. Getting in there requires scaling a sheer wall next to a relatively busy road, so you're being really quiet, making no light, and cowering every time a car passes by so they don't spot you in the lights. The atmosphere is set the moment you enter. It's like diving into water. Sound stops, and the entire place is a constant 14 degrees Celsius. With a slight breeze passing through the tunnel is barely large enough for me to pass through without turning my body sideways. The tunnel is just high enough to work up a decent gate wall hunched over. If somebody ahead of you blocks a passage for a moment, the breeze stops and it feels like the entire tunnel network takes a breath. Because of the way the tunnels are constructed, they echo in such a way that your own footsteps seem to be coming from behind you. They also seem to take one more step than you do when you stop. Of course, we don't allow the guys and gals to take any source of light in there, so it's pretty scary overall. So I'm in there, posted at a side passage to ensure everyone takes the same path and doesn't get lost. I go in first before any of the climates arrive, so they don't know there are friendly faces in there to help them. I'm in there for a while, just waiting for the first to come by, when I see a dancing little light coming down the long hallway. I quietly settled back in my nook and wait for whoever was smart enough to hide some matches and take them away. The light quietly bobs closer when I realized there aren't any footsteps accompanying it. I poke my head around the corner just in time to see it disappear. I hear no footsteps. Still, I settle back and wait some more. When I realize I do hear some scuffling, very faint breathing noises, but still very faint, I become aware of a wet heat coming from right in front of me with a faint smell of a person's sweat, dirt. Suddenly, I realized someone's there. Right in front of me, inches from my face. The breathing stops suddenly. Whatever it is aware of me as well. Whatever or whoever it is, we're both holding our breath, both acutely aware of each other. It takes ages. I'm sitting there unable to move, speak, or breathe properly. The wet heat passes, and some minutes later I Become aware of a very faint light coming from my right side which soon dissipates and leaves. Sometime later still I hear the familiar stomping of combat boots coming down the hallway from my left. I stop the person, tell them to keep following the passageway and take the first right they come to. Out of curiosity, I ask who went in first. No one, he went in for us, and it was explained much later the first guy got lost down a dead-end side passage, and the second girl passed him by. She got nervous from the footsteps and removed her shoes. She saw me poke my head from around the corner and dropped the match. She passed me very slowly. One of the later checkpoints said she was crying her eyes out. Story 8. This was a few years ago in my old house around Halloween. One day, I was home alone in my house. I have a wife, 3 kids, and a dog. I'm in my basement cutting wood and working, when all of a sudden I hear thumping on the ceiling above me. It's rhythmic and almost perfectly in beat. I'm a handyman and do a lot of my own fixing and know the usual sounds houses make. This was not usual. I start to follow the thumping around the first floor. It's as if someone is walking around. I call out my wife's name. No answer. My kids, no answer, just soft moaning with the thumps. My dog is with me in the basement and following the sound with me with his tail straight up, completely silent. This was weird because I have a loud jumpy dog. I then slowly follow the thumping to the steps and I hear a weak old woman's voice calling for Jimmy over and over. Ignoring my hellos, she keeps walking around my first floor calling out. Moaning and thumping, I grab my dog by the collar and leave through the basement door, and I walk around the outside of my house. I go up the street and there's a younger couple calling out for someone. They're calling out for someone called Nancy. I go up to them and say, "Are you Jimmy?" The guy looks at me and simultaneous relief and confusion crossed his face. He tells me that's his dad's name, but he passed years ago. It turns out Nancy was his mom with some kind of mental issues. She snuck out of their house up the road. Her family lived in my house before we did, and she was having some kind of episode. She went looking for her husband in her home. Oh, she also has a wooden leg. I don't know the story, but that was the thumping. We got her home safely, and I also double locked the doors from that point on. I encourage you to do the same. Story 9. I often like to go out running in the summer, or whenever the weather is nice. This happened a week before I was supposed to start high school. I thought about going running that day, but I got that idea in the morning and I run in the evening while the sun is still up, but it isn't as hot as it is in the day, and there isn't a chance for it to get harder if I don't manage to get back in time like in the morning. Well, of course, I forgot my promise to myself and only remember it around 9 p.m. Now it's the end of summer, so the sun is already setting sooner than I'm used to, but I go, I'll get back in like an hour or so. It'll be fine. I already have been putting off running, so I don't want to put it off again. I should probably mention that I'm a female, and even though a lot of girls I know changed the side of the road they walk on when they see even distinctly drunk-looking guys walking, I was the one calling them scared and was ready to take on the first rogue who tried to get me. I also live in a less populated area out of town where almost everyone knows everyone, so I was feeling extra sure of my safety. What a naive fool I know. So I go out, I start my run, and it's fine. It's getting a bit dark, but I can still see the running track, so it's all good. I start to feel a bit off when I see a pair walking in front of me. When I get closer, they turn out to be just teen guys, and I run past them with no problem. When I finally reached the usual point in my run where I turn around at a cemetery, it has gotten pretty dark out. I drink some water from my bottle and just stand there under a tree next to the gate in the territory of the cemetery. But I don't sit down where I usually do because the bench is next to a fence, and the darkness has finally made me a little weary about being alone and having someone jumping me. It's pretty funny that that's what scared me the most at the time. When I catch my breath, I stay for a few more minutes just listening to the wind. I see a bike drive past the cemetery, taking the route I will take. While running back, I leave my resting place, and it's gotten really dark enough that I could barely see 2 meters in front of me. I start slowly running back. After about 15 meters or so, I start hearing voices. A couple more meters, and I can clearly hear someone talking. My thoughts immediately jump to a conclusion that there are at least 2 people in front of me. If I'm hearing a conversation now, I slow down even more until I get close enough to actually hear what's being said. Keep in mind, it's completely dark and this road doesn't have streetlights, so I can't see anything. I get close enough to finally make out the words, and my heart sinks at what I hear. I can't recall the exact words that were Said, but I did hear, I see this girl, I could just pull her into the bushes. They were told bushes, mining one side of the running track. As I said, at first my heart stops, but immediately after I go into fight or flight mode, I can hear my heart beating in my ears, and I'm full of adrenaline, the bad kind. I know I can't just stop, or he will know I heard what he said, so I continue to walk, but thank God that the running track is separated from the road by a small grass field, so I go to the side of the road, making some distance between us. I keep looking at it. Keep in mind, I still don't even know how many people are there, but I see a square of light, presumably a phone, and then I hear him jump on his bicycle and drive off. It turned out he was talking on the phone, but just because he wasn't alone didn't mean I was less scared of him. I walk on the side of the road for a good few minutes until I'm sure he would be far away from me. And once I get back on the running track, I sprint home like crazy. All the way back I was shaking with fear and looking at the bushes and the cars that passed me with delirium, squishing my water bottle in my hand, ready to smack anyone who came close to me. When I finally reached the first road lights, I felt like I escaped death. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story of your own to share and you would like me to feature it on the channel, please send it to the email in the description, or if you prefer, head over to my subreddit, Our Stories from Mr. Revenant. It's the stories that keep the channel going. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to my channel members and patrons: Pegasus, Genesis, Karen, Keating, V. Barry, LJ, Fiona, X, Fox, Scott, I Like, Booty, Monica, Level, Ace, Chris, and Donna, Holly, Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Cyanotics, Heather, Haven, Kitty, Cat, Luna 2, ADHD, Aurora, Janice, Cinderella, Baby, Borderline, Betty, Lady, Dracard, Erica, Nicole, Snowball, Ruthina, Melanie, The Honeybee 987, Pretty Girl 215, Ryan, Brooke, Wendy, Crafty Cow, Tina, Dina, Vampy, Dabs, Trisha, Amber, Krista, Brenda, Absinthe, Alice, Christy K, Spiders, Web, Ooh La La, Andrea, Sue, Monique, Sean, Gorman, Emma, Lisa, Sigma, Cubax, Greg, Chelsea, Amanda, Jane, Sam, Zept, Happy, Sarah, Say, Austin, Tegan, Lil, Smart, Jenny, Gabrielle, Fire 05, Sarah P, James, Gargano, Gemma, Allen, and Alex. I hope you're all doing well, guys. I'll see you all on the next one.